Welcome into another episode of They've Got Now. This is your host, Mark Schindler. As always, before you start today, if you've not already, be sure to go rate and review the show over on Apple Podcasts. Check us out wherever you listen, and of course, subscribe on YouTube. I'm excited to be joined today by Jamie Steyer Johnson, which means already we're talking about the Big 12 today. But first and foremost, Jamie, how are you doing?
Oh my gosh, I'm great, Mark. I'm super excited. I always love cutting it up with you. Went through
Likewise.
the notes that we shared, and immediately there's stuff jumping out that I'm
Yeah.
like, that's crazy. That's the exact same thing that's in my notes that I literally wouldn't anticipate from anyone else. So I'm excited to get going. I'm excited for women's college basketball, but yeah, I'm just excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I think just in general, this conference is like I did a Big Ten preview like a month ago, but I wanted to talk like now that we're getting into like actual conference preview time because October is next week, which is still jarring to think about. Um, I really want to talk about like all the conferences in depth, and I wanted to start with Big 12 because I just like I was going through it the other day, or I guess it was a couple weeks ago when I hit you up. And I was like going through stuff because I was starting to do prep, and I was like, this is like a mess in like the best and worst ways possible because there's just so much going on here um, that we'll get into. But first, I want to plug. Obviously, you have a new podcast that you have started up with over at Her Hoop Stats. I wanted to give you a moment to plug it. I haven't gotten to listen in yet because I've been just all over the place. But yeah, how has that been so far? Where can people find it?
Yeah, no, totally understandable. But it's been an absolute blast. It's called Press Break. It's over at Her Hoop Stats, like you said. We've got a trio that are all co-hosting together. So it's myself, Tyler DeLuca, and Chelsea Late. So some different perspectives. Obviously, Tyler has been around. He does a lot with Oklahoma. So he and I were both in the Big 12 last year. Now he's moving
Mhm.
over to the SEC, but he knows a little bit of everything. And then Chelsea's up in Canada. So giving us a little bit of a different perspective. We can talk about our shared love of Bridget Carlton and, all that fun stuff. But it's been super fun. As anyone who follows me knows, I get into really deep like statistical rabbit holes. So Her Hoop Stats was just a very natural fit. So we're still covering WNBA. We'll move into the college season and we'll just kind of be rolling year round.
Well, yeah, I don't know if you are. Have you ever seen It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
Oh yeah, I
Okay,
mean,
good,
did I
perfect,
literally start a rewatch last night?
good.
Yeah,
All right,
absolutely.
perfect. So this will totally make sense. I always get made fun of for making analogies that people don't understand. I felt like the Pepe Sylvia scene when I was like looking at and trying to piece together the Big 12 because I like, we gotta like the mail. We gotta talk about the mail. Except it's the Big 12, and the more I try and like put everything together on this whiteboard, um, the Google Doc I ended up sending you is 15 pages long. And I don't feel like it helped me put stuff together, but also I was like, wow, this is just like a lot of words and stuff.
That and
And
you're
so
looking around like, is no one else
yeah,
noticing this? Is no one else talking
yeah.
about this?
And then it turns out that Pepe Sylvia is not actually a real person, and Max just hasn't slept in 36 hours. But okay, I think the first thing that I want to start off with is who are the players that to you are realistically, uh, if you are putting in a quote unquote vote for Big 12 player of the year, who are the players that are immediately coming to mind that you think are going to have that impact?
Yeah, so I think that there's a pretty definitive top four to
Mhm.
me. And the really easy ones are the two returning unanimous first teamers in Aoka Lee and Audie Crooks. Obviously, both of them had really significant production last year. They were top four in the league in scoring. They were 1 and 2 in field goal percentage. They were very impactful. When you're a unanimous pick, that's easy. The difficulty for Aoka is staying healthy.
Mhm.
That was her issue last year. That was a big reason, if not the reason, why she wasn't the player of the year in the league last year. And then for Audie, making that sophomore jump is really difficult. And so it's okay. Can you maintain that level of production? What does Iowa State look like with more weapons? Does any of that production decrease? Things like that. The other returner that I think is a pretty easy person to throw in there for various reasons is JJ Quinterly at West Virginia. She was the defensive player of the year. She was second in the league in scoring. Okay. Like that goes, I think, really under the radar for how impactful she is defensively. She was up there in assists. She also was fifth in the league in field goal percentage as like a small guard. So I think that's extremely impressive. And then the other one that I throw in there is Gianna Neepkins from Utah, because she has been a incredible player over her career at Utah. Ended up being hurt last year, and it's really difficult to come back from injury for a lot of reasons. And then when you're getting into a different conference, there's a lot that's going to be going on there. But just because of her caliber of play, she's definitely someone that needs to be in the conversation as well. Couple sleepers I'd throw in there would be like Samaya Nichols from KU. She was
Hmm.
really integral as a freshman last year for them. And then Dariana Littlepage Buggs from Baylor, I think, has been extremely underrated. We'll get into some
Yes.
other players I put on there on that list later, but she is so versatile. She can score, she can rebound. I think that her ball handling's improved. She's become more, well-rounded, and so she's going to be maybe the key for their success this year. So those are a couple ones that if those two teams are playing at their peak, it's probably because of those two players and they could get into the conversation as well.
Yeah, no, I love all those mentions. I think the first two you shout out were the two that immediately came for me with Audie Crooks and Aoka Lee. Um, I just want to reiterate again. I think essentially like it, and Madison Booker was incredible, and I think she deserved Freshman of the Year. She was fantastic. I think, especially when you talk about how much she had to deal with how many injuries that team was going through at the top. Um, I think it was definitely close though, and I think when you look at what Audie did. Basically, the only player who had done that in the Big 12 in the last 20 years as a freshman was Courtney Paris at
Yep.
Oklahoma. Like even like Audie Crooks's numbers were like even more standout than Brittany Griner's, and that's not saying that she's better, but like that's just pointing out like her efficiency, her production. It was a historic season, and I think in some ways it still went under the radar, which is
Yeah.
just kind of wild to think about. Um, and I don't want to like make I don't want to go into the full ISU thing right now, but I agree. I think like I want to see how Audie grows because I think part of what is always so tough for me in projecting this stuff out because like very similar to the W, like in the W and just in professional basketball in general. I always look at the young teams. I get really excited about them. I'm like, ah, well, I think they can make some noise in the playoffs. I just very much have gotten to the point where I'm like, playoff experience matters greatly, right?
Mhm.
And I think I feel the same way with second year players to a degree. Like it's really hard to come in and just keep getting better every single year. Like obviously you're going to get better in some ways, but I think there's just always going to be um outside of like, like the very special talents, which I think Audie has a chance to be, and Addie, her teammate, has a chance to be. Um, I think the difficulty though is like you just kind of don't know until it happens and you see it, right? Like,
Mhm.
and this is not saying that this player isn't a special talent, but like I think of so much of like Cody McMahon and what she did as a freshman at Ohio State. And last year
Yes.
she really had to kind of figure some things out during the first month of Big Ten play and in non-con before she really hit her stride again. Teams have had a whole year to scout you. They have a whole off season to kind of rewatch things on you and come in with a different level of preparation. And I think it's just different because this Iowa State team, I don't want to say that they caught people by surprise. I think people are genuinely like, they know like Bills teams are always going to be serious. You can't just kind of underrate them. But also, like, I don't think anybody expected this team to be as competitive as they were when you looked at them from top to bottom at the start of the year.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, and especially considering like you start out the year without Emily Bryan and you have injuries there. Did not look particularly good in a lot of the early non-conference.
they
And
started four and
so
four, right? I mean, it
yeah,
was like,
yeah, the development was kind of absurd
yes,
as the season went on. And so that's where I do think there's a lot of potential because there'll be less weight on the sophomores than there was last year because of the kind of talent they brought in through the transfer portal. But yeah, it's I've obviously seen them a lot over my life, but I've been around at practices and stuff like that. They look good, but it's impossible to really predict. It's the same issue with the transfers with from year to year. I do think that the most difficult jump is freshman to sophomore, and so that's just what makes everything kind of, I don't know. It's nebulous. It's That's why this is such a weird league to preview to discuss.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Um, okay, I want to throw out some other deep shot names because I agree with all the ones you mentioned, and I love that you brought up West Virginia early because I think just sneakily that team has like just not gotten nearly enough talk this year. Um, the other names that I want to throw out, like I loved you mentioning Dariana Little Page Bugs. I do want to throw out Sarah Andrews' name, who we will talk about more when we get to Baylor. I would also shout out Madison Connor from TCU. She got injured right towards the end of the year, but she was phenomenal last season. And I think this
Mhm.
TCU team is just, they are so much deeper. They're much better equipped to handle the season before them. And I'm really impressed with a lot of stuff that we saw from Mark Hamill's team last year. Um, I think if I had to throw out one last name, or I guess I would do two. One, Serena Sundell from K State just keeps getting
Yep.
better. She's awesome. I love her game. Big part of what made K State so good last year was just how composed and kind of her all around impact in every way last year. Thought she really improved as a defender and was a big part of what that team did. And then just as kind of in the similar vein to Samaya Nichols at Kansas, I have no idea what to make out of Oklahoma State right now. This is just a very different team, but Staley Hurd was incredible last year, especially in Big 12 play. Just like very multifaceted, a tough player to guard, somebody who I think, if she makes that secondary leap, she could definitely, I could see her finishing with some votes for it for sure. And, at least like ending
Mhm.
up on that ballot towards the end of the year.
Yeah, a lot of those I feel like to me it always gets into all right, you have to be like top third of the league if you're going to win player of the year most of the
Yeah.
time. And so
And
then
that
it
makes
gets
it a little
into like
harder. So,
projecting how you're gonna be, who else is gonna contribute, all of that. But Staley Hurd, I mean, she's someone who absolutely should be in the conversation for, preseason, at least all Big 12 teams, things like that. And then if again, she's another one where if Oklahoma State is performing near the peak of their potential, it's mostly going to be as a result of her and her lifting up the team around her just because again of her versatility and what she brings to the floor.
100%. So this can get us into our next part because this is kind of talking about all these players, right? How many teams, if you had to just put out a number, and we'll go through the teams, but how many teams do you realistically think could win the Big 12 regular season title? So obviously not accounting for the tournament, because obviously there's always going to be some potential messiness in that. If you had to look right now, what number would you put on the amount of teams that can win the Big 12 regular season?
I I would say there are 3 that I think are the main contenders and there's 3 that have an outside chance. And there there's a lot of questions with the latter 3 that I don't feel confident in predicting one way or the other enough to put them in that top tier.
Hmm.
But especially we've seen how impactful injuries are. We've seen that there's a lot of times that a team on paper does not perform in the way that we anticipate potentially. And then the one thing I haven't really done is get into the meat of the uneven scheduling. And so that certainly is going to be impactful as well. And if any of those, quote unquote second tier, which it's like, 1A, 1B, if they have a more beneficial schedule, that could also help them. But I would say that you have like 6 that you could realistically have a conversation about, with 3 of them taking the bulk of it.
Okay, so I have it at 3-2. Who are your top 3 teams without listed? Like we don't not in order, obviously. I don't think that we have to do an order, but
In
like
alphabetical order, it's Baylor, Iowa State, and K-State.
yeah. Okay, we're in the same boat there.
Yeah.
Let's start.
It's pretty clear cut, I think, at the very top.
Yeah, I I kind of want to start with Iowa State because we just talked so much about Audie right there. Um, I think again, like a team that sneakily had one of the best transfer classes in the country because this is not just like a transfer class that is talented, like obviously very talented. Like Mackenzie Hare was very good for Marquette last year. Lily Hansford was a big part of Oregon State's run. Um, but I look again like Sydney Harris, a player who played at TCU, who you didn't really get to see the entirety of her. There was some stuff with injury that kind of kept her sidelined, and um, So that was like there was a little bit of muddleness in what her season was last year, but was phenomenal at Central Michigan the year before. Again, like three players who can all just shoot the absolute leather off the ball. And especially when you look at Sydney and Lily, like players who can really play on the wing with size that can shoot the
Mhm.
ball. That just adds to the depth. I think to me, one of the few areas that I could look at this team is like quote unquote having some weaknesses last year was maybe like depth in the front court and on
Mhm.
the wing. Like there's a lot of guards, a lot of like obviously the freshmen who could make an impact, but I think like having more size, like Lily Hansford's 6'2". She's more of a guard, but she's 6'2". Sydney Harris is
Yep.
6'1". Like that adds a lot. And then one of my sneaky favorites too, like somebody who I didn't really get to see a lot during the year, but after doing kind of a deep dive on some stuff in the A10, Lily Talaway is good. Like she was really good for like. Granted, this UMass team struggled a lot last year, which I think is understandable considering how much they were in flux with. They had their announcement that they were changing conferences. They had a coaching change, so they went through a lot. But Lily Talaway was like a star for that team last season as a freshman. She's 6'3", can play both the 4 and the 5. And I think it's somebody who could really round out what this front court is in a lot of ways that they kind of missed some things last year. Um, just kind of seeing all this stuff coming together, what have you thought of that group so far?
Well, as soon as I was looking at the notes that we shared, I was like, see, this is why I love working with Mark, because as soon as I saw Don't Sleep on Lily Talaway, I was like, he
Uh,
knows his stuff. And that's the thing is, even statistically, she wasn't a statistical standout. That's the thing is, you average like six something points per game. People are like, okay, like cool, maybe, oh, she's young, she can develop. That's not really actually the case if you watch the film. It's that there was just something of a lack of opportunities for her. And as you said, there was a lot of kind of inconsistency just because of how much occurred in the offseason at UMass last year. And so she struggled at times situationally, not really in her play, just because there were some issues with the perimeter play. They had a hard time feeding the ball inside. And so when you're a post player, when you're a 4 or 5, you simply are not going to be creating for yourself, especially as a freshman. You have to have someone get you the ball. And so I watched the film. I was blown away. I think she is going to take a lot of people by surprise. She is already extremely capable, was before she got to campus for Iowa State, and then has continued to even improve. And then the other player that gets, I think, kind of forgotten about a lot of the time because of the fact that she was a redshirt is Elisa Williams, who came in from LSU last year. And so she was out all last year as a redshirt. She was a late entry into the portal, decided not to even try to fight for getting that year immediately because she said, no, I need the time to get prepared, hadn't really played much at LSU. And both her and Lily, I was at practice the other day, saw them actually playing against each other for the first time this season. And I was extremely, extremely impressed, really happy with what I saw from those two. Just hoping that, okay, hopefully one or the other can give you some backup 5 minutes. No, like I very much think that both of them will have the opportunity to be impactful. And then, like you said, the other three transfers in this year are it. It's honestly kind of absurd to return what they return and then to also pick up those players where pretty much anywhere, not anywhere, there's a lot of places they could have gone and been guaranteed this many minutes, been guaranteed a starting spot, things like that. Those promises were not made in this situation. They all understand that they are going to have to fight for playing time, that nothing is going to be promised or given, but they understand what the potential of the group as a whole is. And so just the level of buy-in, the level of just competitive edge is really impressive. There's a lot of shot making there.
yeah.
At one point, there was a streak of like, I think 10 possessions 4-on-4 against the scout team. And it was like 8 of them they scored, and 6 of them were from the perimeter. And so you're looking at like in, out. Audie should, you know, double, potentially triple her assists this year just because she's going to be continuing to draw the double, triple team and have even better shooters available on the perimeter, which is kind of crazy considering how well a lot of players shot last year. And then across the board right now, everyone's looking healthy. And so that certainly helps as well. But yeah, there's going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be some things to figure out as far as lineups, as far as minutes, things like that. But I'm super optimistic. I'm really, really impressed with what I've seen so far.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing too is like we talked about. Part of what is going to be so fascinating with this group because, like you mentioned off top, like they have. I love what they did with the schedule. They just said we're going out and we're gonna do it. And I think especially part of what I don't know. I used to be someone who was very much like, oh, well, you need to have like an A plus schedule every year, and I think it's so tough because like you have to win every year. You have to put yourself in a position to have some wiggle room, right? To
Mhm.
especially when you're a group where like with just how young this team was last year, I think that and they still had a good non-con to be fair to, but I think like when you have that, you have everybody coming back for the most part, and you have this all this talent coming in. I like going for it and kind of seeing what this can look like because I think there's a chance where this group is maybe they're just a little bit better than last year, which is still a very good team. Like that's a top four finish in the Big 12. Or maybe they elevate, they take a step, they win one or two of those massive marquee games, and they put themselves in a very special place. And
Mhm.
you can't really predict where that's going to go because that's I just am at the place now where like not to like sound like a fence sitter, but like you just don't know until you see it sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's a chance that this could end up being like a very special season in names and continuing what has been a really special freshman class.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, definitely having the schedule. Iowa State is kind of known as the one that like they'll kind of do whatever. And so, when you're locked into this Thanksgiving tournament and they say, yeah, so your matchups are going to be Middle Tennessee State and South Carolina. A lot of teams would push back on that, but they just, they go with the flow. And so generally they've had a top five, top 10 non-conference schedule. Last year was a little bit of an outlier, and even so, it wasn't terrible, but kind of getting back to the more typical this year because you have to challenge yourself and you have to challenge yourself early. Otherwise, you're going to be trying to figure things out in conference season, and no one really wants to do that. So, definitely knowing what's on the table this year. It's a really motivated group, and they've obviously put themselves in a position where they can make some noise early. They're going to know sort of what they're made of pretty much right off the bat.
Yeah, which is gonna be really fun to watch, because again, that's just fun. Like I think last year for me when it really hit, I was like, okay, the Iowa game. It felt like that was the game where I was like, okay, wow. Like,
Yeah.
yes, they ended up losing that game, but I was like, you could see like that was kind of when they started to turn the corner. You could see like, okay, they have some stuff to them. They're not just going to like because again, they went down pretty decently early in that game and were
Yeah.
able to kind of fight back and really make it a game that showed something, and I felt like you can really see some stuff built off that. So again, just very excited to watch that and how they kind of keep building off that. Um, let's shift to talk about K State now. Um,
Hmm.
K State for me is like K-State is tough because like I'm a person where like I try my best to like I don't know. I don't like the idea of like playing favorites, but K-State was just one of the teams that I could not get enough of last year. Because early on in the year, you saw it with them and I was like, like this group like has like a special verve. They move the ball. They're like they found like a higher level of defense that had not been there before because they were one of the top defensive teams in the country last year. You saw them
Hmm.
as one of the first teams that really kind of I won't even say blueprint. They're so big. They're very mobile. They have like a lot of players who are 6'1" or taller. And they in that early matchup in Iowa City, like being able to give Caitlin Clark some problems. They beat Iowa. They obviously had the rematch with them later again. And I was like, okay, this team, like, there was a point where when I was doing bracketology, they were a one seed for a couple weeks. And then
Hmm.
Aoka's injury happened, and they just really were never really able to find that again. But you look at everything that they add, and like, for people who haven't gotten to see her play, they it's so interesting because this group, it's not that they weren't deep last year. I think they like if you look at the box score, it maybe wasn't deep. Obviously, they really didn't have the ability to replicate anything with Aoka gone, which makes sense, but they found ways to kind of play differently without her. But now I think they are just an even deeper team this year. I love their additions in the transfer portal. Like Tamira Poindexter, who played at Tulsa last year, was one of the best all around scorers on the wing outside high major basketball and just in general last year. Um, 6'1", like pretty smooth, can shoot it, has a really good in between game. And I think especially when you lose somebody like Gabby Gregory, who was really good for this team as like a secondary scorer last year, having somebody who can fill that out in a different way this year is going to be really crucial. Because like, is she the same shooter as Gabby Gregory? No, but she like I think when you talk about like, okay, she can attack and post up smaller guards. She really brings a lot of like mismatch versatility. That's something this team didn't have a ton of last year. So just having players who can do things outside the flow of the offense is big. So I felt like so often if they did not have Aoka Lee going last year, they could not score. That's what it came down to a lot of the time, especially like
Yes.
in the
Yeah,
NCAA
they
tournament.
became really
Yeah.
reliant.
So I think like having more options this year outside that is really big. And I'm excited to see that. I also really like again going back through. I felt kind of bad for Missouri State because Missouri State was a good team last year in the I believe it's the MVC that they're in with Belmont.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and they have like all their best players transferred out, which understandable. Like people get to see them play well, and like added Kennedy Taylor again was another really good addition. 6'3", can really get on the glass, is efficient, much more like a depth player. But like again, having players like that for if you have injuries or if you need somebody to like kind of be subbed out when you're up 10, like that's meaningful. So I mean, this team has the foundation to be a last weekend team. Like they have that level of potential. I think all the three teams that we're talking about at the top have that level, but I think K State to me has the highest ceiling when you look about what they're the veterans that they have already, and kind of just in general what they've been able to put this foundational group with Jeff Mitty's staff. Um, I think a lot just comes down to health. Like the biggest question mark is can Aoka Lee stay healthy for a whole season? Which I am very hopeful the answer is yes, because again, when you look at what the beginning of that season was last year, that's what that team can do. And that was like not just like a random spurt. Like that was they played
No.
against good teams. Um, they were very clearly dominant to start Big 12 play. The injury just completely derailed them.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. You know, Kansas State returns the most production in the league
Mhm.
by pretty wide margin. They're returning over 80% of their minutes and over 80% of their scoring, rebound, assist, defensive statistics, so steals, blocks, all of that. And it's it's hard because it was impossible to get a real grasp on what K-State was top to bottom because of how different they looked when Aoka played versus when she didn't. And it's internal in-season inconsistency is extremely difficult to overcome. So when she's in and out a little bit, when you're having to make those adjustments game to game, it's tough. Gabby Gregory looked very different last year because she had stepped into the focal point of the offense in her first year there. The year prior, she had been able to, she kind of was their five at a lot of the time. And so she usually had some sort of matchup. Either she was able to take a post player to the perimeter or able to take a guard defender inside. And she kind of struggled to find her footing with Aoka back. She obviously made a really big impact, but not as significant as the year before. And then with Aoka, it's what I keep coming back to is how good they would be if they played her for like 25 minutes a game because she would be able to be as efficient as she is, but I think it drops the injury risk so much. Like I always think back to how jarring it was when she was just coming back from being out and she comes to Ames and we play in a double overtime game and she plays like 30 plus minutes. And it felt I was so blown away. Like, and obviously I'm not in those meetings. I'm not the one that has that information, but that was really shocking to me. And then she goes back out after. And so I think especially with the addition of those other transfers, like you mentioned, with both Tamir Poindexter and Kennedy Taylor, they're not her, but they're additional depth that can play in the interior. And so if they can get her minutes down a little bit and just balance it out more, I think that they are so threatening. I think their depth is extremely underrated. I think that Eliza Maupin, when she has good
Yep.
games, is so good. And the worst part for me is that she gets so much more opportunity when like Aoka's out or when someone else is hurt. And I just want her to get that consistent opportunity because I think she's like sixth player of the year potential easily. Zion Walker too. She's one I talked about last year as a potential sixth player of the year, just because there wasn't a clear cut one in the league. And so those two especially can really contribute. And so yeah, when you look at what they did last year, if they could stay remotely healthy, they are so scary. But the fact that that hinges on Aoka staying healthy, and the fact that I don't know if she can. And I love post play. Aoka is maybe my favorite player in the league that doesn't play at Iowa State. I am obsessed with her. I adore her. And she's like, by all accounts, an amazing human being as well. So like I'm a stan, but I just I need to see evidence that she will stay healthy the entire season, and that hasn't been there. And so I desperately hope she does, because I want the league to be as good as it possibly can, which means that I want every team to be as good as they can be. But they have to make some major changes from the way they did things last year in order for that to be the case. But hopefully they come to that same realization, and so we can see them really reach their peak potential, because their peak potential is absurdly high.
I love what you brought up with Eliza Maupin, because she was a player who, again, I think part of what's difficult, like this wasn't a team that plays very fast. So like you have to kind of keep that in mind and remember, like, okay, box score is not always like the most showing of um production. I think that gets lost sometimes. Um and so like you look at what Eliza did, because I think in talking, like it gets lost sometimes too. Like yes, they lost Aoka, but then they still won like 3 or 4 games, including like
Yeah,
they beat Baylor, I think at Baylor. I can't remember if it was at Baylor or I want to say it was at Farrell Center. I can't remember off the top of my head, but
yeah, because it
that
was a
sounds right to
weird
me.
one.
Yeah,
It
it
was
was a
a
really
really
weird game.
weird one.
But point being, like that was I think 2 games after Aoka went down because they beat Kansas beforehand, and
Yeah,
then
with both Jackson and Lee out.
yeah, that sucks. And then Eliza steps in and has like a 16-9 game. She's so good running the floor, awesome in pick and roll. But part of what's difficult is like Aoka Lee is not a pick and roll big. Aoka is like we post her up, and then she's a really good playmaker. Way better than I think her stats give credit to. Again, like they're so good at like just playing that 4 out 1 in like that. But then there was like a 3 or 4 game stretch where they really had things clicking, playing like, okay, well, now we're just going to play faster. We're going to play with more like rim running. Gisela Sanchez, who, again, a player who I really liked last year,
Oh yeah.
along with Eliza, like kind of played the five. We're just going to play, again, really long, really fast. Um, and it
It's
worked.
two
But
different
then,
teams,
but
and that's
then
what's
when
hard.
when you tried to mesh everything together, that's where it just like it just felt like a very much a push pull as the year went on, where they were
Yeah.
still good, but they just didn't have that. And so I'm just so interested to see how they try and mesh that together this year, because I think if they can do that, that's what sets them apart as a group. Um, but also have to shout out Amani Lester, player who I think like I'm
Oh
interested to see
yeah.
what kind of steps that she take for this year. Like you talked about, I think just the depth in general for this team is like pretty standout. So I'm very excited for that. Um, I don't know if you have anything else to add on K State. I don't even think I'm trying to remember. I'm looking up the schedule right now because I thought that I had it pulled, but
I mean, my only other big thing on them is just that you mentioned Serena Sundell earlier, and I think she's an extremely underrated player. She's gotten some accolades, but like I don't think that people realize how integral she is to the success of that team as a whole.
yes.
She's uh, all the time we internally, and I in discussions compare her to, like,
Are you
for
about to say something? Okay, you might say something that I was about to bring up. So go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. I
she
just get
reminds me
excited.
a lot of, for Iowa State, Emily Bryan. She
Okay.
is like, they are very similar in that everything runs through them. And so, like, for me, I mostly talk with Iowa State people. And so you have to contextualize within their own program. But she's a great playmaker. She's long. She does everything. And so I think that she's a terrific player. I really like K State as a group. Like, I really like their team. But Serena Sundell, I think, gets forgotten a little bit for how incredible Aoka Lee is. But a lot of the success they have with Ayoka out is a result of Serena being able to kind of hold it down, and so that maturity is so crucial. But
Yeah.
there's a couple other ones that I compared. I'm interested to hear who you were thinking.
Yeah, my comparison I've made, so like as like we've talked about before, I do a lot of my work is in draft and scouting stuff. And for people who aren't aware, I announced I am no longer with the WNBA. And my goal is to work in a front office slash for a team. So hit me up. Um, I think Serena, number one, a player who absolutely should be somebody people are excited about in this draft. Like just a such a good playmaker, and it's not just playmaking, but the decision making. Like it feels like she always is trying to make the right play and do it
Yes.
quickly. That's why she reminds me a ton of Tyrese Halliburton. Like so much like Tyrese, watching him at Iowa. At Iowa State, like a player who just like so long, but like you obviously like very similar in terms of
Yeah.
they came into college as like kind of underdeveloped physically as players. Like I remember talking to Serena last year, and she said she came into K State as 6'1", but was 135 when she first came on
Yeah.
campus, which was a big reason why K
Crazy.
State was one of her only Power Five offers. Like, and you look at the development and the way that she has grown and grown her game, obviously, but also just grown her frame. Like a player who really has a good shot to be a very good pro. So I'm excited to see what that looks like this year. Again, not
And
everything
that,
is 1-to-1, but I think very
yeah.
similar to me of like kind of what Tyrese's development curve was like.
And that reminds me of like a thing, like a drum I kind of pound a lot, which is that the two most easily impactful positions and the two toughest positions to fill are a good true point guard and a good true post. Because, everyone wants to do the positionless thing. And so to have a post truly capable of playing inside consistently and buying in and impacting the game is tough. And then point guards are just, they are so rare anymore to get a true point guard where they're cool with being pass first. They're obviously the best are also capable of being real scoring threats, but I think that those two are just so difficult because there's less wiggle room in what makes a successful one of those positions. You can do a lot of things really well as a forward, as a wing, but there are some things that are just non-negotiable in the post and as a point guard, and that's what really is a big strength of Kansas State, assuming that Ayoka's healthy and now that they have some more of the depth, and that is also a strength of Iowa State, and I think what makes their ceiling really, really high. And there's more of that in the third school that I think you and I both have in
Yes.
our top three this year, which is so interesting.
Yes, we have a lot to talk about with that one. I do just want to announce because some news just broke. We now are getting a new like a random tournament in the middle of January just popped up called the Coretta Scott King Classic that will be taking place in Newark, New Jersey, on January 20th. UCLA and Baylor will face off, and Texas and Maryland will face off. This is awesome. It impacts the Big 12 less than we're used to it impacting the Big 12, which is I'm still just so not used to Texas and Oklahoma not being a Big 12 place. But that's a big thing happening. So I'm very excited about that. Will be taking place on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. That's a big time. Well, I guess not tournament, but like just kind of two game classic to have happen.
I love that that's something that the NCAA, especially on the women's side, is starting to really get going. Like Iowa State's at a couple of them this year. And so I think that those are super fun. And it's just a really good way to get a lot of fans of the game as a whole, because that's what we've really been adding here recently is people that are following the entire landscape as opposed to just their one local team or whatever.
Mhm.
And so they're so good. And those are going to be such good matchups. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like Baylor and UCLA, I'm ecstatic. That is awesome. I am so fascinated. I am so intrigued by what that's going to look like. Oh my gosh. This just like, oh, this made my day. I love good basketball.
Me too. That makes me very excited. Okay, so I have to mention too, just real quick, looking at K State's schedule, I actually think their schedule is a little bit stronger this year than it was last year. Um, they play Green Bay again. I believe they played Green Bay last year. Belmont, who will be solid, although they had a lot of transfers. Bart's a really good coach. They'll still be good.
Oh, for sure.
Creighton, who will not be quite as good this year, but should still be pretty solid.
one of the
Um,
oldest teams in the country still, so you're going to see
yeah,
a lot of experience between those two.
definitely. They play Duke in the Bulldogs Classic on November 25th, and then they'll either play DePaul, which not quite as good, but could potentially play Oklahoma. So that could be fun. Very excited about what that could look like. And then the other games, it's a little bit easier on out, and then they take on Texas A&M and Middle Tennessee in mid-December. I think those will be solid. So I'm looking forward
Mm-hmm.
to that. I think it's a strong non-con headed into what should be a very interesting Big 12 season. Um, we can talk about Baylor now because I think Baylor is a team that I just in general like you and I talked about them a ton last year. I think I was very excited about them early on there. I was excited about them all year. They went through like kind of a lot of ups and downs throughout the year, right? Like they started off with just an incredible start to the season. I think like I mean they went to the Sweet 16, could have easily gone to the Elite Eight in a game that went down to the wire against Southern Cal. Um, but I think you look at, I mean, this team is returning a lot, but also they do have some key departures, particularly in the front court with both Asia Blackwell and Dreana Edwards moving on to the pros. But I think they brought in one of my favorite pure like fit transfers and also talent. Like Aaronette Vonleh is going to make this team so much better. Um, a very mobile defender who can just like really play. Obviously brings a real size. Like Asia Blackwell and Dreana Edwards did a lot playing in the post, but they were both 6'1", 6 foot. Aaron Vonleh is like legit 6'3", so I think like that
Yeah.
just brings like a different element, especially in like the Big 12 is like they are very post heavy this year. I don't know if you felt that going through everything.
I'm so
Obviously,
happy.
it's gonna. I mean, like it plays a part obviously because like Ayoka Lee is here. Obviously, Tiana Jackson's not here anymore, but like still, like every team it feels like has a 6'4" or taller post that you have to contend with.
Mhm.
Um, but then yeah, so adding Airnet is huge. I think that's like a post presence that they did not have last year because as good as Driana um and Asia were, like I just don't think they were quite that level of like you could really just drop the ball into the post for them. Like I think there were times where you could, but often one of the issues, like this team started off amazing on offense last year. That was their bread and butter. They were fantastic offensively. And then it hit a point where it's like, okay, we're not going to help in the post, and then you have to play one on one, and you're going to struggle. And I think that was
Yeah.
something they had to work through last year, and they got better as the
That
year went
limited
on.
the ceiling
Yep.
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they really figured it out as the year went on and got better with it. Like Janet Van Geitenbeek was really huge in kind of settling things down, and they became a much stronger half court team as the year went on. I think Aaronette gives them a much stronger foundation off rip for like having that.
Mhm.
Because this is a team with a lot of playmakers, a lot of players that can make things happen. But I think having a player like Aaronette who can kind of settle them down in the post, along with some of the growth of the players on the wing, the law firm of Little Page Bugs and Fauntleroy, which I'm very excited about for them entering as upperclassmen this year. And obviously Sarah Andrews back. Like this is again, there's so much talent on this team. And I was really impressed with what Nikki Collin did as the year, again, kind of figuring things out as the year went on last year. There's a lot of potential for this group to do things this
Yeah.
season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're another team that returns a lot of experience. They're returning over 70% of their minutes. And then, the drop off is obviously return only half of their rebounding, but that's something that I think is honestly with their personnel about as easy to replace as any situation where you lose the caliber of rebounders that they had in both Blackwell and in Edwards. And so obviously adding Vonleh is massive. I have a friend that I discuss a lot of transfer stuff with, and the second that news broke that Vonleh was transferring, I text her and I said, "That is a Baylor Bear." It was like the most obvious thing in the world to me, and I'm not saying like I heard things like
Mm-hmm.
that's not what I'm saying. I say I looked at it and you knew that Baylor was hunting in the portal for a 5-man. And for whatever reason, they just had not gotten one done yet. And as soon as she went in, I said, that is the perfect fit. She can run the floor. She is versatile. She can defend. She does have that length. She's so efficient. Like, that's what really blew my mind, is especially because of how difficult it is to watch the Pac 12. I didn't get to see as much of Colorado last year as I really would have liked because of how interesting I find them as a team on the whole. But, like, the fact that she was doing what she did in, like, what was it, 25 minutes a game, something like that. Like,
Yeah, 25.
her efficiency is just absurd. And I think she's the perfect fit. Kind of under the radar as well. An addition for them is they signed a really good JUCO player in Wyatta Jennings.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, there's a little bit less need outside of the post, as you know, you kind of alluded to in our notes, things like that. But she was really good. She is all over. She is defensive, offensive. And so, especially given some of the struggles that Baylor had defensively last year, I think that she's someone who sneakily could be extremely impactful. She's 5'9. She can play out on the perimeter, but she averaged 3.5 steals and a block per game last
It's
year.
pretty
Like,
good.
I mean, that's just so impressive to do that consistently. So, you know, she was the WBCA 2-year college player of the year. She's extremely talented. And so that, with everything they bring back, and of the players that you and I have already listed, that's not even getting into the fact that Yaya Felder, I think, had some times where they were trying to figure out how to use her, how she would adjust, and she really came along as the year went on, as well as Jada Walker, I think, is extremely underrated for all the attention that Sarah Andrews gets. The fact that Baylor can consistently run the 2 point guard system, which we talked about a lot last year, that's something that they really try to do a lot of. And Jada, I mean, she is massive with that. I think that if they could even get Yaya involved and reduce Sarah's minutes slightly, her efficiency would go way up. She had to play a ton this past year. Her efficiency was a little bit down from past years. But if they can get those other players, and Jana, I mean, down the stretch,
She was so
crucial.
good.
Like, she is maybe the biggest reason that they really pulled things together and went on that run in the tournament, just because, I mean, she brought so much steadiness. She was always, you know, very consistent there, again, down the stretch. And I mean, I think that she has a chance to make a massive, massive impact this year. But yeah, that guard core is very intriguing. Baylor has been kind of up and down with Nikki Collin, in that they've had some really significant success, but there's been some times where you just kind of scratch your head and say, well, wait, but why did they struggle in this game? Or, well, why did they go on this skid? And the, they've ultimately had pretty consistent performance at some point in every season. But I think that as more of the players are more consistent, you know, when you are not having a lot of transfers in this year, when you have players that have played together for at least a year and some of them for multiple years, that's when you can really start to get a rhythm going. And so I think that Baylor has some of the most potential this year just because of that consistency. I'm
Mhm.
just really interested to see if they can fully take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think that there's a chance this group ends up better than last year's team. Like, I'm very high
Oh,
on them. Like, I
100%.
know that's not really saying much, but like, yeah, I think, and that to me, that's saying it is saying a lot. Because like, I think this group has potential to be like outside shot Final Four team. Like, I don't think that's
Yeah.
crazy. Um, Again, a
I
lot
think
comes
they're
down to
built to be more consistent.
yes, because I think the consistency piece is so huge, like you talked about. I do want to say, like, to be fair, Sarah Andrews, I know I believe she was coming off of an injury that she sustained like early on in fall,
Yeah.
before the season happened. So it just kind of never felt like she got fully right from that. Like,
Mhm.
um, in terms of like just like being, herself condition wise, it didn't seem like she was herself until like maybe later on in the season. And just looking at, the sheer consistency part, I think that's what I really want to see from Sarah's game. I think that has been a thing with Baylor and her at Baylor is like getting her to be consistent. Because like you just look at the discrepancy between wins and losses, and obviously any player is going to have a discrepancy in wins and losses, but like she shoots 41% from the field and wins, 28% in losses, 27% from three in losses, 39% in wins. Like, I want to see that even out, right? Like, I want to
Yeah.
see her be able to be that. Like, she still has the same level of impact in a game. Don't get me wrong, but like, you got to have that same level of like makes in a game too. And I think getting to that level will be really big for her. Extending her career as a pro too. Like that's just kind of where it is. And I think when we talk about her being a player of the year candidate, if that becomes more consistent, I think that she's absolutely in that conversation because you just look at that game that they played against USC. They do not come close to having that be a close game without the performance she has against them. I mean,
Hmm.
that was like the game where you're like, okay, yeah, that's why Sarah Andrews is such an important player. Like, I mean, obviously you can point out to that in every game, but I think watching that game in particular, I mean, she took what 13 attempts from deep. Like, yeah, that's yeah, I have it right in front of me. That was what it was. Like, and especially too, part of like what the last thing I'd want to hit on with Baylor too. I think in some ways this year is almost I don't want to say better for them, but I think like there are true posts in this league for sure. But I also think so much of like the new teams coming in, it's about their guard play. And I think again, part of what made this team so successful in the NCAA tournament, this team has really good guard play. This team has the ability to really shoot the ball. And they also have the ability to really defend the perimeter. I think you watch what Dariana Little Page Bugs and Bella Fauneroy did in that game against Juju Watkins. I think personally that is the most uncomfortable Juju Watkins looked as a player all of
Yeah.
last season. And obviously she still did really good things. She had a case to be National Player of the Year, and that's not saying that she's bad or something. Like yeah, clearly not. But point being, like I think when you have those two players and this team built around them, and then as part of it, I should say, like they have the capabilities to make every single like any player who is a strong guard uncomfortable. So that's why you have to be like excited about what this team can do in the postseason because they have the tools to really just like extend a run and make something difficult in a tournament setting. So I'm excited about Baylor. Did you have anything else you want to hit on with them?
No, I think we got it.
Okay. We can just go really quickly through the three teams that I think you and I are in agreement on because I have an assumption on who you added in as your third. I had two, and I think the third is the team that I thought about and could lump in. I'll go first. Obviously, TCU. I know
Mhm.
we have TCU there. I don't really. I mean, I don't really think we even need to say a ton about TCU. I was really impressed with a lot of stuff we saw from them last year. We talked about this the last time we pod, which was surprisingly long ago. Um, they run good stuff. Mark Campbell's system is very good at developing a high class offense, and they're just way deeper this season. Like they brought in an
Yes.
insane amount of transfers, all very good, who are proven college players. At most of them at the Power Five level. Um, Haley Van Lith is a good college player. When obviously, I think this system is going to be better suited for her than what it was at LSU last year. Um, I think Maddie Shear is a player who has probably gone underrated just because of Kentucky's struggles. She's a player who
Mhm.
fits that ability to, you know, take and make really difficult shots, particularly on the move. Strong defender, can keep the ball moving. Like you see the bones of this team becoming like just a very good, well-rounded, deep team that is going to be one of the better offenses in the country.
The transfer I even think could be the most impactful is Donovan Hunter. To have her running the point after,
Absolutely.
Jaden Owens was so crucial for them. They've really struggled to replace her at the point guard position after she got injured. And so to have Donovan Hunter coming in, someone who is tall as a point guard, 6 foot, really was able to do a lot for Oregon State last year. So has played against good competition. She has 3 years left. So that's really big for them as a program. But then, we saw how Van Lith at times was put into, having to try to run the point, and that's just not the preferred position. Having her as like the off guard is definitely more suited to her skill set. And so to have someone else who for sure is going to be capable of running that point is absolutely massive for them. And then you're also returning over 70% of your production from last year. They are certainly very intriguing. Having more depth also helps a lot of the time with injury issues. And we know extremely well that that was an issue for them last year. So yes, that is a an intriguing spot for sure.
Yeah, I'd add too, because I love you bringing up Donovan Hunter, because I think to me, like, obviously they brought in a lot of good transfers. She was my favorite transfer they brought in. I think she is the one I look at like that is the player
She's
who
my
could really
top pick
change
as
things.
newcomer of the year from that team.
Yeah, because again, like her box score wasn't anything crazy, but Oregon State played a little bit slower. I think they're going to play really fast at TCU.
Mhm.
It's just going to be a different kind of environment offensively, and a player who just improved every single month.
Mhm.
Like you
Mhm.
look at each month, her scoring went up, her efficiency went up, and she played her best basketball during the NCAA tournament. I thought she was fantastic against Notre Dame. Obviously, everybody on that team had trouble against South Carolina, but I think she's still very much hung up as an athlete. Um, yeah, I love what you brought up too about like just being able to have HVL more comfortable. Like, you know what she can do is like kind of that scoring combo guard who can really play off the ball, get into things. Having a player like Donovan who can initiate sets, really keep things moving. Like, there's just a lot of variability in what this team brings, kind of similar to Baylor, obviously in a different light.
Mhm.
um, and being able to have multiple playmakers who can really create. Um, I think one of the two players who I'm just kind of most interested to see how they fit into will be DeAsia Merrill and Natalie Majerick because, again, like sort of like we talked about with Aoka Lee, Sedona Prince being healthy is just so instrumental for this team. Like they cannot really handle an injury to her. At least, I mean, last year I should say that was not something they could deal with. Obviously, Agnes Aminopu and Aaliyah Robertson were both very solid last year and did good things. Actually, I thought Agnes was fantastic. Like she was
Yes,
somebody who was like a really
I
bright spot for me that I really loved
she's
getting to see grow.
she's definitely on my like underrated list for
Yeah, yeah,
returners.
she was really good. So I think just overall, like you look at this, and there's the chance for this group to really click and be very good. I think, like we talked about, Madison Connor was fantastic last year. I'm excited to see how that all plays together. What does the defense look like is kind of going to be my thing, because they didn't really find a like again. It's hard because we just as soon as they started to get into the meat of their schedule is when all the injuries started to hit. So I just felt like we didn't get an awesome look at what this group could do. When they're fully healthy, I feel like we're gonna get a better look this season. But I mean, knowing what Mark has been able to do, both here and at Sac State in terms of like building out an offense that is going to be just a juggernaut, I'm pretty confident this team's going to be pretty good this year. I think a lot's just going to depend on consistency and injuries and kind of figuring out some of the things around that.
And may even struggle at times early against, top level competition, but I think that they have the pieces to be pretty confident that they will figure it out to some degree.
Yeah, and there's going to be it's going to be interesting for them too because their non-conference is stronger than last year. They'll play NC State and South Carolina both in non-conference, so
Mhm.
that's a lot. And then they go to the Cayman Island Classic and they'll play two of USF, Notre Dame, Utah, and Mississippi State. So some good stuff in there as well. Um, they don't have any freshmen on the team, which kind of adds to a point that we talked about before we got on. But like, I'm not sure there has been a conference hit harder by realignment than the Big 12. I mean, okay, a conference that still exists that has been hit harder than the Big 12. Pac-12 be damned. Like there are multiple teams in the Big 12 this year that have one freshman or less.
Mhm.
And granted, like I think part of that's just like how the game has gone and where it's evolving to, but also like in general, you just look at how many transfers are on each team from this past season. It's pretty jarring. Like especially a lot of the teams that are coming out of the pack and even a lot of the teams that were very sustained in the Big 12 this past year, like there's just so much turnover. Um so I'm fascinated to see what that means long term because right now, like I think there's just a lot of like seniority in the Big 12, which is going to be cool for competition. But in terms of like what this looks like long term, I will be really interested by that.
Yeah, I mean, over half of the players in the league are, by some rough figures, are at least at some point transfers. And then you've got about 35% of the league are seniors, whether that be fourth or fifth year. And so obviously this is the last like true year of having the fifth years. There's still going to be that with red shirts and whatever, but it's an old league, but it's a new league in a lot of senses where you have a lot of experienced players, but not a lot of people that have been in the same spot for a long time. And that's what happens when, you have people moving conferences, you have coaching changes, all of that. So it's definitely very odd, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's a consistent thing with TCU as long as Kimball's there at least, because he is someone who has a long history with recruiting. He's extremely well connected, but
Yeah.
he's already been able to bring in these transfers and have success with them. And so if you could kind of position yourself as that, not to say like a true transfer you, but if the shoe fits, like I can see that continuing to be something that they keep going back to, because if they have success with it this year, that's starting to be more of a pattern.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm really excited to see how they keep building out because even you just think about what this team was, a season and a half ago, and kind of having to rebuild that roster on the fly to get to where they're at now. Um, I'm just excited to watch them come together because some of the ball that they were playing early on in the year was so fun. I do have to say though, to anybody who had the great displeasure of seeing this game, they played a non-conference game against Nebraska in Fort Worth, and the camera to record it, so it wasn't broadcast live. The camera to record it was put on the scorer's table. It was like one of those 360 cameras that like tracks the ball automatically. And the
Oh,
amount of times I bitched about this film to like other people who like work in video, it's legitimately like the worst thing I've ever seen put on Synergy. It was so bad. Like, did I watch the whole
not me
thing?
making a note to go
Yes.
look at it immediately after this.
I almost want I'm pretty sure I'd get flagged for a video violation if I did it right now. So I'll have to send you a screenshot of it later. But it was like, dude, it's legitimately so bad. It's like the sideline ref point of view, except it's like you're also wearing like Coke bottle glasses so you can't see anything. One of the worst things I've ever seen. But just, neither here nor there. Um, let's move on to our next team, who I almost put in the top tier, and that's West Virginia. And I think
Yep.
it's fun because I feel like you and I might be two of the only people who have talked about West Virginia being in this tier. This team brings back almost everybody. Like they graduated a few players, but I believe almost everybody's back. The majority of their starting lineup is back. And they were really good last year. Like I think that just continues to go under the radar. Like yes, they lost in the second round of the tournament, granted, against a very good team that went to the national title game. Can't lose that. And they beat a team that should not have been both. Just quick soapbox thing. Both West Virginia and Princeton should not have been seated as low as they were. I think that was such a mistake by the committee.
They waited
Um,
so heavily on the way teams finished the season. It was like
it was very annoying. Like,
it
yes,
was
Princeton
unreal.
lost to Columbia in that championship game, but like they had beat Columbia multiple times during the regular season. They'd been good in non-con. Like, don't even get me started. Same thing with West Virginia. Like West Virginia was good in the Big 12 too. Like they had beat multiple teams in the Big 12. Yes, they did not do great in the Big 12 tournament. I don't care. That team was so much better than where they got seeded, but whatever. Um, point being, they bring back JJ Quinterly. They bring back who I'm one of the players I'm most excited for in the conference is Jordan Harrison. I love
Yes.
Jordan Harrison. Like JJ Quinterly deservedly got a ton of love for this team last year, but I think like I mean what Jordan does, she's a 5'6" guard, but like so big in what they do with their ball pressure defense, was so good attacking against Iowa and Princeton, just getting the ball off the dribble. Like might have the quickest first step in the conference. One of the things I keep coming back to, I have no idea how she didn't go Power Five right out of high school. Like, was with Mark Kellogg at Stephen F. Austin before he made the transfer over to West Virginia. Um, and she's just been awesome. Like, she's been so good. Again, JJ Quinterly too, defensive player of the year. Like, this team's defense is so good. I think the only question that I have holding them back is post play. Like we've talked
Yep.
about, I think the post play at the top of the league is what sets a lot of those teams apart. They bring back Tiers Moore, who was very good, but she is a little bit smaller. She's 6 foot. Um, I do like some of the players that they brought in terms of being able to fill some of that spot out. Like, um, like the Jordan Thomas, their freshman post who they brought in. I'm not
Mhm,
sure how much she'll play this year. I think she has a chance to fill in. They brought in some JUCO slash community college transfers as well, that I think could make an impact there. But point being, like, this is largely the same team as last year. They're a little bit older. And again, like they added some guards who are going to be good as well. Like Sydney Woodley was very good for Long Beach
mhm,
State. I'm interested to see her impact. Bigger aspect too, like Sydney Shaw was a really key part of Auburn last year, and I
mhm,
think fits in so well to this West Virginia team. Like Auburn plays a very similar style to West Virginia. A lot of like playing off the dribble offense, kind of in that dribble drive, and playing a lot of pressure defense. Like I think Sydney could fit in so well with this and be like pretty perfect as a third guard for them. So I'm just fascinated to see what that looks like. Sorry, I've been like going on and on. Where are you at with this Auburn team heading into
no,
the year? I'm
I'm
not Auburn, Jesus, West Virginia. You know what I mean?
no, yeah. No, I'm extremely high on them as well, with the obvious caveat of the post presence. The other player that I think is really interesting to me is Zaya Nugent. Now that she's, I think, healthy this year, was injured last year, but she also came over with Kellogg from Stephen F. Austin, and so that's just more guard depth. The thing that really blew my mind that I had somehow completely like had leave my mind until I was doing prep for this, they fully played last season with a maximum 10-player roster. Like they had preseason injuries and then a couple preseason like eligibility things with transfers that left them with 10 total players, and two of them only played 21 games due to injuries and stuff. Like that's crazy. And let's also make note that that's with the absurd pace that they play at.
Yep.
Like, that's crazy. Jordan Harrison, you are speaking my language. Extremely underrated. Was a second team All Big 12 player. She was third in the league in win share. Like, she was ahead of JJ Quinterly in win share. She had a 5.2. Like, that's crazy. She was so impactful. She did so much for them. And having both her and Quinterly as options, I think that they play off of each other so well, which for how similar they are in some ways, is not easy. And so that just really impressed me. I thought that they played really cohesively as a group. I thought that Kellogg had a incredible coaching job. Had just a lot of really tough situations, especially with, like I said, the lack of depth, some struggles in the post. I was continuously really impressed. I felt like they kind of maximized their talent in a lot of ways. And so
Yeah.
I'm very intrigued by them this year. They're a team that I'm never really going to bet against. I think that the interior is going to be the I mean, it's the obvious question mark. That's going to be the limiting factor as to what their floor is, what their ceiling is. Like you said, Tears and More was solid, but she's not big enough to be the go-to if they're going to be truly elite. She's a solid option, but I don't know. I think that if they can get some decent minutes out of Jordan Thomas, like she's 6'3", she's a top 100 recruit. If again, it's a tough spot to come into, but if she can come in and even be a defensive presence, that raises their ceiling dramatically because they were great defensively on the perimeter. And so if they could make it really difficult to feed the ball inside, then that was kind of their recipe for success against teams with elite post players. But as soon as you got the ball in, it was generally kind of game over. Either there's a foul or they're just easily scoring. So if you can even put her in there to defend, I mean, her or man, I thought that Danielle Eric Babu made huge strides throughout the course of the season where
Mhm.
you don't even need them to be huge offensive presence. Their whole thing is defense and that they create off of their defense. And so if a couple of those players could even be options for 10 to 15 minutes a game, that's going to be really crucial for them. But I think what they return is enough to say, yes, they are going to be good, but it's about how good they can be.
Yeah, I didn't even mention that Kylie Blackson is back, who started at the 5 for them for most of last year too. I think, like, just kinda shoring up that backup position is gonna be key because it was like, okay, if she ever got into foul trouble, it was difficult because, like we
Yeah.
mentioned, I think Tears Moore did really good stuff, but just the sheer drop off of going from 6'3" to 6 foot was, like, very difficult against a lot of the teams in the Big 12. Like, I think that was a big reason why K-State kinda had their number. Um, but it's also part of, like, they were so good against playing Oklahoma because they were able to
Yeah.
just,
They can
like,
run with them.
"Cool, we can run with you, we're faster than you," like, they have a lot of the bones of good stuff. I'm sorry, I feel like I keep forgetting stuff, but, like, I forgot about, like, okay, Lauren Fields is not here, so I like replicating her stuff is going to be key because she was their best shooter last year for the most part, most consistent, I should say. So continuing to build off that, but like I just still think like sleeping on West Virginia in any way, shape, or form would be a mistake with how good this team was last year. Um, with what they're bringing back and just what they showed. I think, like, again, maybe the offensive consistency wasn't always there, because you can't always rely on shots going in, but you knew this team was going to play insanely good defense pretty much every night. Sometimes you're just able to break their press if you have the right personnel. But
Mhm.
I'm excited to watch them come back. Last shot with them though is interested to see what Chelia Rivera can do. Played at Northwest Florida State the
Mhm.
last 2 seasons and transferred in. Haven't seen much of her game, but just in general, there have been a lot of players who have come out of that same program and been able to make an impact. So we'll be watching for that.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
let's move to our last team that we have in this tier. Um, who is it for you? Because I have a feeling off of what we've talked about already, but who is it for you?
I actually made an adjustment. So I have like TCU, West Virginia, and then I have like another sub tier that I added one other one in there. So
Okay.
initially it was just Kansas. Now I have Kansas and Utah because that
Okay.
was an oversight on my part to not have them in there initially. With Meekins returning, you lose Alyssa Peely. Yeah, that's tough. But Utah returns so much more than a lot of Big 12 fans, I think, are going to be aware of. And so I am extremely, extremely interested to see what that looks like between having, like I said, Neepkins back. You've got Jenna Johnson, you've got Kenny McLean. Like you have some really solid players there. I don't really have them as ones that are them and Kansas both. I don't think they win the conference, but I think they're going to have a great shot at beating the teams that are competing to win the conference.
I like this tier too because like I wasn't sure. I didn't feel great about projecting Utah into that one because like you said, I think just they bring back a lot, obviously. But losing Alyssa Peely is pretty massive, and I think you bring in a player in Maya Toure who was very good at Rhode Island the past 2 seasons. I'm just going to be interested to see. Like, I mean, she cannot be Alyssa Peely, obviously, but she kind of brings a different element. She's a little bit taller. I think is going to bring a little bit more defensively that they didn't have in that same spot last year, but isn't the same type of threat from distance.
Mhm.
I'll be interested to see like, okay, does that maybe look different at Utah? We know how
Yeah.
they kind of prioritize things and how they're able to get the best out of people in that way. So I'll be fascinated to see that because Rhode Island is just like such a stark difference in style compared to Utah. Um, but I think Mai could really play some of her best ball in Utah, so I'm excited about that. Um, obviously, added Kyra Evans, another player who can she's got Power Five experience, can play in the post. So I think that is something that should work out well. Um, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to add on Utah.
The
I think a
biggest
lo-
thing with Utah is sort of similar to me with West Virginia in like a completely different way, but that
Mhm.
they don't have like the big, like solid physical post presence that is maybe solidified. Like they have people that I think could do it and are capable, but not that have done it there and in the exact same way. And so that's going to always be a question mark, especially when you're talking about competing at the top of the conference in the Big 12 because of, as you said, the strength that they have in the post. But they have quite a few people that I think could do it. And they have a lot of perimeter length. And so you have that kind of trade off where they are going to have that strength with the capability on the perimeter that's going to be really difficult for other teams to defend. So it'll be their games will, I think, consistently be who's able to play their style in a way that is going to be maybe like the starkest difference between any team in the Big 12 and the rest of the conference.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'll be looking at too, though, is like worth noting. Like, it's cool because she's back on staff this year in her first coaching job. But Deja Young, who was their best defender last year,
Mm-hmm.
is obviously a coach now, because her time is up as a player. But like, so I'll be fascinated to see how they kind of fill that out. Although I will say, like, I really liked how Maddie Wilk came along last year.
Mm-hmm.
I thought she showed some really good stuff. So, going to be fascinating to see how she kind of plays this season and makes growth. Again, somebody who really plays some of her best ball further into Pac-12 play. Um, I don't think I have anything else on Utah with that. I am excited to talk about Kansas though briefly because they're a team that I've flirted with having there. I think that they're a team that's definitely in play to make the NCAA tournament, which is kind of what
Mm-hmm.
this tier is. Um, we talked about Samaya Nichols early. I think her growth is probably the biggest hinge for this team making that growth. Like, um, they're sort of in a youth wave to a degree, but also like they're here to compete right now. Like they still have a lot of veterans on this team. So what has you feeling good about having Kansas here?
Samaya Nichols, as you said, great player, extremely capable, did a lot as a freshman, was part of a contingent that was unreal as far as conference wide freshman performance. Like top to bottom, Big 12 had, I think, unquestionably the best overall freshman group. Like when you talk about most teams had a freshman that was consistently contributing at an extremely high level. They had, I think at my last count, they had 13 players that in any other year would have for sure made all freshman team in the Big 12. And they had, I think, at least 4 to 5 that in past years would have for sure won freshman of the year. Like it was crazy.
It's pretty
So
good.
Samaya Nichols is terrific. Again, under the radar, Wybet Mayberry. She has been really solid for them. She can handle the ball. She is an experienced presence for a team that only returns 36% of their minutes. That returns less than 25% of their rebounding, less than 40% of their scoring. Like you're having to replace some mainstays. Last year they were an extremely old team, but when you lose Tiana Jackson, when you lose Holly Kurzgeter, when you lose Zakai Franklin, things are going to look really different. But having Wybet Mayberry as kind of a helper in that transition into what the new wave is going to look like for Kansas is really, really big. And then someone that I know you have highlighted in your notes that I, of course, know and am familiar with is Elle Evans coming in from North Dakota State. Iowa State played North Dakota State last year. I was really fascinated by Elle. She didn't have like an incredible game, but that's that's okay. Iowa State's a team that matches up fairly well with tall guards. So she had a really solid season. She had a terrific career at North Dakota State. She has that level of familiarity with Kansas because I don't recall exactly the timeline. I don't think that it would have been any actual crossover with being there, but I know that Morgan Page, who's the now associate head coach at Kansas, had been at North Dakota State prior, and so I believe she was someone who like was around when she was being recruited initially. So that always helps to have some kind of point of contact, point of consistency, someone that you have previous familiarity with on staff. And so I think that that only makes things easier for her to move over there. But she is someone who certainly is more than prepared for the Power Four level, someone who can really do a lot. She's a 6'3" legitimate guard. Like she is handling the ball. She is a terrific shooter. I'm really, really interested in what she can do. She is going to be really crucial. Again, there's always kind of the one player that maybe isn't the top one on the scouting report, but that you're, or maybe not the top returner that you're saying a lot of their success hinges on her. And a lot of Kansas's success, I think, is going to hinge on Elle Evans translating well because she is going to be one of the most experienced players, one of the people who is the most used to having that sort of weight on her shoulders. And I think she can handle it. So again, Kansas, I don't think they're going to be winning the conference, but I think they're one who will be crucial in who does, because they'll have a good chance at taking down some of the teams that'll be in that race.
No, I agree. I think Elle to me is like one of the players that um just didn't really get a lot of buzz in the transfer portal, and I think is so exciting because she fits what Kansas does so well. Like they want to play a ton of four out with motion, attacking mismatches. And she's like, I mean, she was almost a 50-40-90 shooter the last season. Somebody who like can run a
At
ton of ball
six
screens,
three, like
can shoot off movement. Like she's very, very good and somebody with a lot of potential to keep getting better. And somebody who I think like it's one of the things that was tough with this team last year that I think again kind of went under the radar. Their shooting was like pretty off at times last year for a team that really wants to play.
it could be
Um,
okay, but when it was bad, it was bad.
yeah, like for reference, they shot 33% from deep, which isn't bad, but when you compare it to the year before, I'm trying, hold on a second, I'm going backwards because I'm almost, yeah, okay, they shot 32% the year before. What do I know? I swear there was like a difference in it, but like just in general, like it felt very up and down throughout the year instead of consistent. I would be curious to see if they feel the same way. That's how I felt in watching it. So that's
Mhm.
I'm speaking my truth at least. Um, but point being, like L is like a legit like 40+% shooter that I think is going to translate. I think a lot's going to be like, how does physicality look? How does that look? What do the drives look like? Things getting to the interior. I feel good about it, but also like a player that I'm excited about too is Jordan Webster, who played at UC Riverside the last couple of years. Wasn't the most efficient, but I think a lot of that's what she was tasked to do.
Yes.
Her being able to play off of Samaya, I'm very excited about. I think in general, like this team will definitely be smaller this year because you don't have Tiana Jackson, so that makes it obviously a little bit harder. Um, but I think in terms of doing what they want to do offensively, I think that this group could be still very potent, like they were the last two seasons on offense, with the chance to maybe be even more consistent this year. Because I think part of what was tough last year, it felt like obviously they put it together at the end of the year, which is really fun to watch. But like they kind of went through this stuff like during the year of like, okay, well, we want to play like this, but we can't. Okay, let's just like get the ball to Tiana and that'll make things work. And okay, it's a little bit different when you don't have a 6'6" safety net every night, for better and for worse. Like,
Hmm.
and I don't for better is the wrong way to put it. You know what I mean? Like, I think just in general, like
Right.
having a Big 12 player you can Big 12 level player that you can rely upon sets so much up for you. But also, like, I thought there were times where they could get out of what they wanted to do because they were like, okay, well, maybe we have a mismatch in the post. Um, and it's not that you didn't, but like, it just, I don't know. I think like kind of similarly to like we talked about with K State, it's just like, I don't know. It's a lot easier said than done to have a 6'6", 6'7" player that I think people recognize because like you might have a style that you want to play, but like making it all mesh together is just not as easy as it seems. So I'm just gonna be
And
fascinated how they put that together.
I mean, just to be completely blunt, like Tana Jackson was not a consistent player. Like her upside is so tremendous, but if she was off, she was off. And you also feel like, well, but because of how good her upside is, they would try to get her going. And there was just times that it wasn't happening. And so there is the potential to, again, we talk about consistency and how important that is to compete for a conference title. And that's something that could potentially increase without having that kind of variability inside. You may not, you may have a lower ceiling at your very, very best without having that really tall presence, especially defensively. But maybe you can figure out like your identity, who you are a little bit earlier, and maximize that. And so that's what's really interesting for me. And also just having Samaya Nichols a little bit more settled. There were times last year early that they kind of forced things through her. And it did pay off later because she got more comfortable. And so she was a lot better by the end of the season. But there were times early where it was like, oh, is that like the right move with how much experience they have to have so much going through her? Well, by the end of the season, yes, it was, because they were
Yeah,
better when she was more capable. But it just took some time.
yeah, you said it better than me. And I think again, part of what'll be interesting this year is like you can't replace Tiana Jackson. But like, what do they do with the five? Is kind of my big
How do you
question this year.
adjust?
Yeah, deny Papa DePulu is still here. I'm so rough at saying Greek last names. Um, again, a player who I think is better than her box score. Like she had like
Yeah,
good moments of being able to fill in. I'm not sure that she's ready to take over a starting role. I'm going to be interested to see how they adjust with that. I like Freddie Wallace, who they brought in. Again, it would be more of like an undersized five. I think she's 6'2
yeah.
slash 6'3, but was a good JUCO player. But I'll just be interested to see what they do there because I think in some ways they can just kind of lean in even more to doing what they really want to do on offense. But I do still think like being better on defense is going to be really crucial for them because that has been like kind of that was, I mean, part of what was really difficult this last year for me with Kansas is that they took a pretty substantial step back on defense. After being like one of the better defensive teams in the Big 12 the year before, they were just a point blank below average defensive team for the majority of last season. That's just not what you can have happen if you want to be an NCAA tournament team.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just do a couple quick things to get out of here because we can't talk about every team. Obviously, we've already been here for almost an hour and a half, and we've only talked about what, 5 teams, 6 teams, seven. Well, I guess technically 7 teams. So I feel a little bit better about it.
Seven
Um,
plus player of the year plus like
yeah. I mean,
news. Oh my God, we're doing great.
we've done some great stuff. I guess the last question I'll ask you: early freshman of the year candidate. Do you have one?
Yes. So we talked about this. It is really, really difficult this year because, like I said last year, how there were so many massive contributors this year because of how old the league is, which was the case last year, but I don't know, there was something different about it. I guess maybe the difference in the recruiting, and just the way that realignment has affected it. It's really hard to pick one out. I think that my prediction for who will be voted preseason freshman of the year is Kayla Numbs from Baylor because she is top 50, I think. She's up there. She is tall. She has, demonstrated efficacy on national circuits. Baylor is a team that people are generally going to be looking at as, getting preseason awards. My personal pick is Tabitha Betson from Colorado because I think that there is the most opportunity there, and I think that she is well poised to step into that opportunity. Again, I'm not someone who's watching a whole lot of high school film or anything like that. So I'm not going to say that this is based on a lot of like in-depth film watching and research, but I am going to say that based on her being a highly ranked recruit as well as having international experience, I think that that is really key to being prepared to contribute at a high level right away. I think that she's someone who is on a team that has a lot of need, and having played with Australia internationally several times, I think that she could be very well poised to take advantage of it.
I see that. I like that call. I think I'm with you. I've seen a lot of these players play in high school in AAU particularly, but I don't. I think part of what's going to just be so interesting for me to watch is like where does the playing time come from for some of these players? Because like we
Yeah.
talked about, I think especially the teams that have a lot of the best freshmen are teams that are trying to win right now. Like,
Yeah.
and granted, like I think every team would like to win right now, but it's just like it's different levels to a degree. I think if I had to pull a player who I would probably see, this is so hard. Like I've thought about it. I think I would probably go with Lauren Swan for Arizona,
Okay.
would be the player that I throw out right now. Could well be wrong. Um, I really liked her at Lehigh. I've liked pretty much every player who comes out of Lehigh. Christina Rady does an incredible job there. But mainly, like I think just with how this group wants to play it, she's probably going to come off the bench because they brought in Paulina Paris, Jada Williams is still there. See, even now, because now I'm like, wow, there's just like how much playing time is going to be there. I think that it's going to be there though, because this team's still like replacing a lot of depth that they lost from this past season. Um, I
That's
always
what's hard is that I feel like all of the picks that we both would be listing out are ones where there's so many unknowns that it's
Yeah.
like it's there's not just freshmen that could be in the mix. It's that there's so many transfers and then you just don't know how the team's going to work as a unit. Because I think that
Precisely.
we both probably have another name in mind that you almost want to pick, but can't quite because of some of the hesitations. And that, for me at least, Jane Wooten, knowing that she is coming into a weird situation and she's also undersized. So it's like, okay, how well could you adjust? Is the playing time going to be there for you? I think that as a point guard at Oklahoma State very much could be, but I wouldn't bank on it, but maybe.
I mean, yeah, I like Jaden Wooten a lot, point blank. Like so I've seen Jaden play a lot in person, which is hilarious because I don't live anywhere close to her, but to where she plays. But like, that's just how things work out sometimes. Um, she's so good. Like we said, she's 5'6", but like just incredibly good getting into the paint, really confident, like gets down on defense. Um, I think she's going to struggle with some of the small point guard stuff that players do, but like just in general, like the quickness and the strength she plays with, I think will translate. Um, I just don't know what this team is going to look like.
Yep,
Is my biggest
exactly.
thing. Like Anagret Ase is back, and she was the primary ball handler for this team last year. I'm just going to be interested to see like how do they try and mesh that together. You have other players who have like primarily had the ball in their hands too that are coming in, and like I don't know how this all meshes. I'm interested to see what it looks like, but I have no idea. But I agree. I mean, I like Jaden Wooten a lot. I think she's going to have a great career at Oklahoma State, and just in college in general. Like I'm very excited to see what she does. Um, I get so, but largely, I mean, I think this answers our question because like it's so hard because who like all these teams have a lot of seniority. You have the numbers listed at the bottom. 116 of 221 players in the Big 12 are transfers. 82 of them are seniors. This is a very old conference with a lot of teams that are all being competitive right now.
Mhm.
Thank you for putting those numbers together because I would not have done that myself or would not have had time
I'm
to do
gonna be
it.
honest, I had them
Um,
passed along to me. So,
oh, okay. Well, I guess
I
I
did
can't take,
do
yeah,
all of the returning production. So I will take credit on that one. But
deserved.
yes,
If I
yes.
could throw out one last name, and mainly through like, I don't really know what BYU is going to look like, but Delaney Gibb is really good. I like her a
Sure.
lot. Guard out of Canada, who I've seen play a couple times. That I
BYU
think
will play some freshmen.
they will play some
They've
freshmen, especially
demonstrated
too,
that
like
they're willing
because
and they
Kaylee
kind of have to.
Wilson's out for the season, isn't she?
Yes.
So
Yes, she
that's
is.
just opens up.
That's one that I'm like, how is no one talking about this? Like I see her on lists. I'm like, y'all, she's out there doing her thing. She's out there on mission. Like they are
Yeah,
going to be a real different team, man.
yeah. So I don't know, man. uh, yeah, shoot. Okay, like two more quick questions, then we're out of here. Which team outside of the teams we already talked about do you have the most questions about? Like, there's like such a wide range of possibilities for who they could be as a team this year.
Okay. I'm gonna give you two, and one of them actually answers your question, but another is just one that I want to highlight a little bit. So,
Yeah,
for one, Colorado is very
that's
intriguing
one of
to
mine.
me. Obviously Naimir Dew went from Iowa State to Colorado. I'm super excited for her. It's a great move for her. I love her to death. She's one of my favorites. And obviously no hard feet. Like people transfer. It's especially for grad stuff. Like she's super excited about what she's studying. All that. Anyway, I was out in Colorado visiting, and my cousins were playing in Colorado's team camp. So I shot her a text. We had literally had lunch the week before when she was
Yeah,
moving. And I'm like, hey, I'm in the gym just in case. And she's like, I'm coming in to say hi. So I see her, and I got to finally meet JR, who I am like just the biggest fan of. Like, I love their program. So it was really cool to meet her. But what I said to her and what I've been saying is that Colorado reminds me a lot of Iowa State last year in a little bit different way. It's less of the freshmen coming in that you're anticipating having a big impact, but you have a lot of new faces that I think are being very much underrated. You have Nye, you have Lior Garzon from Oklahoma State, you have Judge Nwori, who really never was able to play at Tech, but has absurdly high potential. You have a lot of really, really good transfers that actually make a pretty cohesive roster. And so, do I think that they're going to be competing at the very top of the Big 12? Maybe not. but I think that their potential is a lot higher than what people are maybe giving them credit for. But it all has to mesh together. That being said, the most questions I have is for sure UCF. Like, I think that the moves they made are sneakily very good. I think that adding Hannah Gusters is really big. She had kind of some ups and downs, but she is someone who certainly can give you a serviceable interior post present and better than serviceable. She's very solid. Inside, they had the leading scorer in the league in Caitlin Peterson. And so, with what they have returning and then some of what they added, I'm just very interested. I think they could look obviously a lot better than they did last year, being at the bottom of the league, but they had flashes where they looked pretty solid. And I think that the pieces they add could put them solidly competing in like the middle. Like, I don't think they're ready to break through to the upper echelon, but I do think that they can start really putting some stuff together.
Yeah. No, I like that on UCF. I don't really have anything to add to that, but I agree. I think I liked some of what they did last year. I think it's always, especially when you're watching a program build, you have to kind of like watch with a different lens of like, okay, like can you see like where's the growth? What's the development looking like? Can you see what this could look like in a couple years? And I definitely see that with UCF. I love the Colorado point because to me that is the team that just has like such a wide range of possibilities. Like we talked about what Aaron Vonleh is going to bring to Baylor. You obviously can't replace that. That's really difficult. Quay Miller's gone too. She was fantastic. So that entire front court is just like gone. Jalen Sherrod, currently playing in the playoffs for the New York Liberty. Love her to death. Such a good player. Again, cannot replace that. They also lost to Mia Sadler, who went to, I believe she's at Ole Miss now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like what kind of growth does Kendall Wetta make is going to be really big because the guard play is really important for this team and how they want to play. But I also wonder like do they just play completely differently this year?
Yeah.
Um because that's kind of the vibe I'm getting, especially with how things went in the portal for them. Because I think they made really good moves in the portal personally, like we talked about. Like
Yeah.
I like, you know me, I like Naimir Du a lot. I like Lior Garzon. This team has just gotten like there's a lot of length. They're kind of like very different from me, like guard heavy with quite a few posts last year as well. To now like they have a lot of players on the wing and in the front court. How do they kind of balance that all out? I also really like Jade Masagayo, who they brought up to
Yes.
Missouri State, another Missouri State player that we have to shout out. Like, there's just a lot of potential here. I think a lot's just going to depend on like, okay, can the guard play click and kind of have everything, get figured out from there. Um, but I mean, JR is a really good coach. This group has been consistently building, and I don't really anticipate them taking a massive step back. I don't think that they're going to be a Sweet 16 team this year, but I think they could definitely make it into the tournament if they're able to keep
Oh
playing.
yeah, I think unless they're picked really high just based on like reputation, they're the team that I would be most confident in finishing above wherever they're picked in the preseason polls
Yeah,
just because there are so many questions, but there's a lot of really good potential answers.
absolutely. To give my quick answer on teams that I have the most questions about, obviously we mentioned Oklahoma State. I'm right there. I've always been fascinated by some of the stuff that they're trying to do. Like I think you've seen like real moments of them putting some things together, but then now they just have a completely different team. So I'm not sure what that's going to look like and how they go about it. The one that I probably come back to is Cincinnati. Cincinnati
Yep.
is my UCF. Like I really um maybe impressed is the wrong way to put it, but like I just felt good about what they brought last year. Like I never felt like they weren't in a game. Like they were always they started to build like a solid defensive foundation last year. It wasn't perfect. They're still kind of a smaller team, but they have good players. Jillian Hayes continues to get better. I think the biggest thing for them is like, what does Jillian Hayes look like as a fifth year senior? Does she really take that leap? I mean, she had the most efficient season of her career last year and was obviously very good. But I think, continuing to build off that, I like some of the transfers that they brought in tonight. Hilton, again, obviously a player who was very solid for A&M last year. Um, just in general, like I think Katrina Merriweather is building a solid program there. They've been doing some really good stuff on the recruiting trail, which I'm excited about because
Yeah.
that's just people bringing players that high that are that good and with that much potential to Cincinnati, keeping them in that area, um, is really big because like Kentucky's like a surprisingly good hotbed of recruiting. So I think being able to bring that and keep that in Cincinnati is big time. And I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily going to be this year for them, but I think that there's a step for them that, okay, can we be a team that finishes over 500? Are we a team that maybe we snag an extra win or two in
If they take
non-conference?
that first step, then next year is so crucial. So that's I feel like they are approaching it the right way, and like it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and they're taking it year by year, but they certainly have the potential to continue to look significantly better each year in some ways.
Absolutely. Now to finish out, we're gonna do the ever classic name some guys sitting around. Who are some players to you that are people that who are some players to you that people might not know about yet, but should slash will by the end of the season? Well, we talked about one who was the first on my list, Elle
Mhm.
Evans from Kansas. I think is going to be fantastic. I'm really excited about her. But who
Yes.
are some other players that you would name? And my stipulation is that they haven't made an All Big 12 team yet.
Yes. So I will first do like my lightning round of people we've all like mentioned already, which is like my short list for potential newcomer of the year, because just by default, people generally won't know them. I want to specify Aaronette Vonleh would be a really easy choice if it weren't for the fact that she's ineligible, since she's been at both Colorado and Arizona and both have joined the league. So without her there, my short list is Elle Evans at Kansas, Tamira Poindexter at K State, Donovan Hunter at TCU, Kenzie Hare at ISU. I think she's crazy underrated. We've talked
Yeah.
about her a lot. Somehow she doesn't get talked about much. She's incredible. Couple sleepers there could be Haley Van Lith from TCU, obviously, especially if she can get back to kind of her old efficiency. And then you've got Wada Jennings, I mentioned from Baylor, really, really productive at the JUCO level. If she makes a jump, hey, but there's not as much opportunity at Baylor. I think that Macy Heward at Oklahoma State, especially knowing that there's a whole lot of opportunity there. She's really young. She's just a sophomore. She was really good at Montana last year. Uh, you've got, shoot, Arizona has a whole lot of options, but anytime you're getting someone in from South Carolina, that's going to be some potential, especially just knowing that there is going to be a whole lot of opportunity at Arizona. Ja could be a little bit of a sneaky outside pick there. But beyond that, some of my most underrated players there, I think Addie Brown's maybe the most underrated player in the league. I still get a little bit heated when I think of how little she was discussed last year for what she did. She averaged 13 points, just over 8 rebounds, and just under 5 assists, about 4.8 assists per game last year. She was one of 4 players to do that in the country, and she's the only freshman to do that in the last 25 years. Like, that's absurd. Excuse me, 15 years. I can't do math. Either way, over a decade. Like, that's insane what she was doing. Her efficiency, what she can do at all levels is incredible. And so the fact that she gets to kind of fly under the radar is a benefit to her, I think, because if someone of her caliber can still catch people off guard, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
The other big one that I have that we have already mentioned a little bit is, I think that Agnes Evanopu at TCU just is really underrated because similar reasons. She's really versatile. She was so good for them defensively. I think that she is an extremely capable player, and especially if she has more consistent support around her. She's one of the very few people who started the entire season, who is able to stay healthy. And so just having that maturity returning is really, really big. And then there's kind of an off the wall from West Virginia, which is that Kaya Watson is their fourth returning starter that doesn't get mentioned a whole lot because her numbers aren't extremely flashy, but she's someone who, again, was just consistent. She showed up and she did kind of what needed to be done for the team. And so I can really see her being able to take a bigger jump if she isn't having to play quite as many minutes. I think that she can be a more efficient scorer as well. So kind of interested in what she can do.
Yeah. No, I like all those shouts. I'll do a couple quick ones. I also love what you mentioned about Addie because, dude, she's so good. Um, like essentially was the point guard for this team for large stretches of last year with Emily being out, and obviously, like you want to see the turnovers come down this year, which I think will be a natural thing happening with all of the obviously the guards are getting older. She's
Yeah,
going to be a sophomore this year. Like there's just growth in that of in and of itself. Um, but yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. But I think for me, so and my Arizona shout out would be Skylar Jones, somebody who like when they cut
yeah,
down to they played like Arizona just had a wild season last year for people who did not get to watch the Pac-12 in their final iteration. They basically lost multiple players for the season due to injury, had a couple players transfer out at different times throughout the season, and basically played a six-player rotation to end the year. And Skylar Jones, who was a freshman last year, really played her best basketball over the last month or so of the season. Like a 6-foot wing that can, kind of create her own shot a little bit, really good slasher. Brought it defensively because you have to if you play for Adia Barnes. Um, and like I'm excited for her to continue growing. She might not necessarily like be a giant breakout star this year, but I think she's just gonna be a really good player over the course of her career at Arizona. Um, Other players that I would bring up, Jalen Brown at Arizona State. I don't know what Arizona State's going to look like this season because, again, like we talked about Oklahoma State having a lot of transfers. I think that Arizona State had the most transfers in out of anybody in the Big 12.
yeah.
Um, but Jalen Brown is one of the returners. She's a returning leading scorer. I think, cleaning up
Mhm.
efficiency is going to be big, but like absolutely a player with pro potential. Like really smooth, very athletic, can create her own shot, can create for others, and is still growing in that regard. Like just a player that's very fun to watch. And I would love to see more people get to know about her as hopefully Arizona continues to get better. I mean, Arizona State continues to get better. Um,
Mhm.
I'm trying to think if I had any others I wanted to bring up. I think that is it for me. Is there anybody
I'll
else
do
that
I'll
comes to
do
mind for you? You
one
got another
last
one?
one. Bella Fauntleroy at Baylor. Like
Yes.
she's been solid, she's been recognized at points, but I think that her capability is so much more than anything that we've seen yet. I'm a huge fan of hers. I think that defensively she's better than she gets credit for as well, and she's also like a very good shooter. She's a beautiful shot.
Yeah.
So I would be interested to see. I think she has the potential to make like the biggest jump on that Baylor team this year.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm excited to keep watching her. Excited to keep watching all these players. Jamie, is there anything you want to shout out before we get out of here?
Oh, I mean, just I'll be doing all this over on the press break this year. That's actually I'm bouncing straight from here to go record that today. So that's where I'll be. I also still am covering the Big 12 over on the 10-12 podcast. And beyond that, just throwing stuff out on social media left and right. But no, I'm super excited, and I'm sure that we'll catch up as the season gets going too. Because if we could talk about this much before the season even starts, just think of what we can get in
Yeah,
season.
it's a problem, but it's a good problem to have. I appreciate you being willing to talk about basketball for this long because I could, like we said, I think we could keep going, but
I want to
um,
get into film with you sometime. That's my dream.
hey,
Is I
we
think
can
that would be
absolutely do it. I would
super
love to.
fun.
We could do something during the year where like we just pull some stuff from, especially because like the Big 12 is like one of the conferences that is not asinine about like having clips thrown
They
back up
understand
on
how
YouTube.
important media is.
The AC, tell that to the ACC. The ACC is like, oh my god, awful. The ACC and FIBA are like they'll haunt you down.
Yeah.
But yeah, point being, we'll have to do something with that for sure because that'd be very fun. But to everyone listening, of course, follow Jamie and everything she's doing. Keep up with the break, which I need to start doing. So I'm excited to listen in on that one. And most importantly, have a great rest of your day. And thank you for listening/watching.